Good morning. This is Tom Clark with the Father's Heart Media and Papa Tom with Papa Tom's Tales. I've told you before about writing books for Papa Tom's Tales, a series of 12 books, a grandfather's bedtime stories. Well, today we're starting the first video podcast for the Father's Heart Media with a young gentleman by the name of Paul Lee, who's helping me set up these video podcasts. So going forward, in addition to having audio, we're going to have video podcasts, and that will be really great. So I want to share with you a little bit on the video podcast. I can show you a copy of the book, Papa Tom's Tales, the first one. The second one is Luke the Light Bearer Defeats the Spirit of Confusion. This one is The Boy Who Found His Name. It's about identity. The second book, book 2, which was printed in China in December, although we're having some difficulty getting it through the supply chain. It should be here the first week of March, which is next week. And we'll show you that copy in the next video when we can produce it for you. The third book will be The Birthday Present. And that one is about how to overcome the spirit of deception. So all the books deal with fears and how the love of God, particularly the perfect love of God, the Father, helps a child overcome their fears. And it is our desire to connect people to the heart of their natural fathers and the heart of God the Father. As you know, our mission statement has always been Malachi 4:6, at the end of the age, which we truly believe we're in right now, the end times, that the heart of the fathers is in his desire to bring the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, both on a natural level and a supernatural level. So with that in mind, we are promoting the goodness of God the Father in every way, shape, and form that we can have. And in order to really understand the love that God has for us, we have to have experiences with him. And the primary way that God shows his love for us is to communicate with us. And we believe the primary way that Scripture tells us that God communicates with his children is through dreams. So I'd like to share with you some dreams I've been having and some things that the communication is going on between God the Father and myself, and how these communications happens through dreams. First of all, I think I'd also mention that all the books that God has given me to write have come from dreams. Usually on a Friday night, and on Saturday or over the weekend, I would backfill the conversation that I believe was happening in the dreams, in between the pictures. So understanding that, it's really our commitment to our audience is to help them to connect with God the Father. And that connection underscores the fact, or the truth, I should say, not more than the fact, the truth, that you need to communicate. A connection relationship isn't a connection relationship unless it's a two-way street. It's got to be between two beings, two people, or between God and us and God. It's back and forth. It's got to be a back and forth two-way street. So our commitment to you today is to express in the overall sense how the heart of God the Father expresses itself to us through dreams and communicating that way. So I'd like to share with you the first dream, and that was just a couple nights ago. About 9:30 at night, I received sad news that one of my friends that I haven't seen in years, probably haven't seen him in 20 years, but I knew him well 40 and 50 years ago. It was a high school friend of mine named Bob. Sometimes we call him Bobby. He passed away. I lived out in San Francisco with his wife. They went to a yoga class. When the yoga class was finished, he had difficulty breathing, and then all of a sudden he passed out. And his wife gave him CPR, called 911, brought the ambulance over, but they couldn't revive him. And when I learned that later that evening, I went to sleep. And when I went to sleep, God gave me a dream. And the dream was a flashback in my mind to 51 years ago. 51 years ago, I was a freshman in college at Georgetown University. And I had another mutual friend of ours, Bobby and I had a mutual friend named Lee. And Lee and I were sitting around drinking, as kids will do at 19 years old, in the Washington, D.C. area at Georgetown University. And our school was about to start. We were on the break between Christmas and second spring semester. And it was probably around, I'd say, maybe the 14th, 15th of January. And we were talking and reminiscing about how much we wanted to go see the Super Bowl. And we knew the Super Bowl was going to be in Miami. It was going to be in the Orange Bowl, January 17th, 1971. And we were there about the 13th and 14th. And we were sitting there and saying, we would really like to go. So you know what it's like when two kids who are 19-year-olds want to do something and they get this crazy idea in their mind. They have no money, no car, no food, no shelter, just the clothes on their back and maybe some underwear they could replenish. And we decided we were going to go down to Miami from Washington, D.C. So that afternoon, we decided to hitchhike all the way down to Miami. And we said, we don't even know anybody in Florida. Who do we know that knows somebody in Florida? So somehow we find out that we could call our friend Bobby. And Bobby told us that he had an uncle named Jack. And Jack lived in Fort Lauderdale. So Bobby gave us Jack's address. We didn't have cell phones back then. We had no telephone number. All we had was an address in Fort Lauderdale of Bobby's uncle. But just out of the generation of Bobby's heart, Bobby was the one, by the way, that passed away Wednesday night. So there was the connection, the dream. The guy was speaking to me about it. So we went down, Lee and I hitchhiked all the way down one evening at the middle of the week, probably around Thursday. I guess it was Thursday or Friday. I would imagine it's about a Thursday, and if I remember correctly. And it took us about 6 or 7 hours, and all we got was as far as Richmond. And Richmond on Route 95 in those days had a toll booth. So we weren't making much progress until we got to the toll booth. We got to the toll booth and it's getting dark. It was somewhere between 6 and 7 o'clock. And all of a sudden a Lincoln Continental pulls up, and an older gentleman, at that time we would consider older, somewhere in his 50s probably, pulls over and says he's getting tired driving and where we were going. And he said, we told him Florida and Fort Lauderdale. He says, great. He says, I'm going to Fort Lauderdale. And if you guys are willing to drive, you're welcome to hitch with me as just do the driving. So we got excited. We jumped in the car. I said, I'm the designated driver. I drive all the time. I had a Thunderbird at the time of my life, previous to that in high school. And I was always the designated driver, driving all my high school friends around after they were drinking everything at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was a pretty good driver. And so I took the driver's seat, and Lee took the passenger side, and the gentleman sat in the middle. I think he was protecting himself so Lee wouldn't give him the old heave-ho and get him out of the car and would take his car from him. So we proceeded from south of Richmond all night long. I think we even got a ticket going about 80 miles an hour in South Carolina, where 95 stopped, and it was a state road. But the gentleman paid for the ticket, and we continued on. And 6 o'clock in the morning, when the sun was rising up between 6 and 7, I got drowsy, and Lee took over the driving until we got to Fort Lauderdale. And he wanted to drive the last hour, the gentleman who owned the car. And we got to Jack's house, and later that afternoon. And we got to his house. Lee and I got out of the car and went to the door and knocked on the door. And this young lady came to the door, and she said she was Jack's wife. Can't even remember her name right now. And cute, attractive lady, was an Irish, black-haired Irish gal from Boston. And we told them we were Bobby's friends from high school. That was our only credentials. We were Jack's nephew's friends, and we were here on our way down to Miami, and we thought we would stop over. So we go in the back. She invites us in. We is in the house. He gives us a couple of beers, as you do when you're Irish and you're in that time of life. I think we were legal back then. We were 19. Not that that mattered at that time because we drank before we were legal age. So she told us about Jack, and he came back from work around 5 o'clock or so. And we sat in the back, we told him what was going on. And Jack told us that, by the way, I have to describe Jack to you a little bit. He had a shaven head, very muscular, tanned. He had this 9-inch Bowie knife next to him. And he was a deep sea diver. That was his occupation. In fact, he was cleaning the underwater hull of the Queen Elizabeth. So he told Jack of our plans of going to the Super Bowl in Miami that coming Sunday. So he said to us, do you have transportation? He said, no. Do you have any money? No. Do you have tickets? No. And he got the picture that we were just two crazy kids. He didn't even know how we made it safely down there from hitchhiking. But we told him the story about the old man in the car, the Lincoln Continental, and he laughed and he thought that was really funny. And so he took a liking to us, offered us the next day. He was going to give us $20 each to do some gardening. And down in Florida, there was basically sand and rock, so I don't know how much weeds we actually took out of his garden. But we had a good time, and later that evening, it took us out to dinner and gave us a steak dinner and gave us drinks again, and we're having a grand old time. And so we said, hey, Jack, how was it that you got down here to Fort Lauderdale from New York? Because we knew he was Bobby's uncle, and he came from the New York area. He said, well, it's a long story, he said, but it's probably worth telling. He said, Bobby's father saved my life. He said he had killed the man up in New York in some kind of fight he had. And this guy, Jack, looked like he could kill somebody. I mean, it was like, he was strong enough to kill him with his bare hands, but maybe he used that knife or something. I don't know how he killed him, but he killed some guy. And the person he killed happened to be a son of a mafia boss. This is a true story. And there was a contract put on Jack's life. And his older brother, Bob Sr., was a captain in the New York City Police Department. An Irish cop, you can imagine, of all things. They had a lot of them back then. And Jack's Jack's older brother, Bobby, heard about it and demanded to have a meeting with the mafia bosses. So meeting was arranged. He went to them and he told them, you better not touch a hair on my little brother's head, or you're gonna have a war. And it'll be a flat-out shooting war. We're not gonna arrest people, we're gonna shoot to kill. So they made a deal. And Jack Harron, that was his last name actually, was not able to come back into New York, or couldn't put a foot back in New York. It was free game. And the mafia bosses pulled the contract. And that was it. I mean, Jack was then coming back down to Fort Lauderdale. And he never forgot that his older brother had saved his life. It reminds me of a story that I had heard when I was a child, that my father told me, because I was the oldest of 8 children. And he told me a story about Boys Town, which was an orphanage in Omaha, Nebraska, about around, I guess, the 1930s and 40s. And there was a Catholic priest named Father Flanagan, and he set up this orphanage in Omaha called Boys Town. Look it up, it's historically true. But as the story goes, as my father told me, there were some boys who lost their parents. And the older brother took the younger brother on his back, gave a horsey back ride, as we used to call it, and carried his younger brother several miles outside of town when he found out about the orphanage, and came to Boys Town, knocked on the door. And Father Flanagan opened the door and saw the 2 brothers. The older brother and the younger brother. And he said to the older brother, he says, "Is he heavy?" And And the older brother said, "He ain't heavy, Father. He's my brother." And I share that story because my father shared it with me. And I thought about that story when Jack, the younger brother, was talking about his older brother, Bob. His older brother had saved his life. And I started realizing why he was so hostile to us, because we were simply the nephews, his nephew's friends. Bob, his older brother's son's friends, and he took care of us. And I started to realize how important it was, or how meaningful it was, to have love pass through families, and how our friend's father took care of his brother, Jack, and his brother, Jack, took care of his son's friends. And it was an expression of love that happens, and in expressing the Father's heart, I just wanted to take some time to share about that dream that I had, that I hadn't thought about for 51 years. But I had that dream that God gave me, reminding me of how the Father expresses his love from fathers to sons, and from brothers to their siblings, from brothers to sisters and other members of the family. That's the perfect love of God flowing through life. And I hope you can appreciate and receive from this podcast an expression of the Father's love for you. And that's exactly what Jesus did. We will know our big brother that way. That's who he was for us. He took care of us that way, so that we could have a connection with our Father. And we could have that connection in many ways, and I appreciate having that connection through dreams. So we need to bring our conversation to a close. And we want to thank you for participating in the first video podcast from the Father's Heart Media. We'll be doing more of these, and we'll be doing more with interviews. And we hope that you will be able to enjoy all the media that we're producing. Again, I want to mention Papa Tom's Tales, which is the first book, The Boy Who Found His Name. Each book deals with the fear and how the love of God can help you overcome the fear. And I want to express in another thing, we want to be changing the culture of how children's books are purchased and how children's books are communicated. We really would like to reach out to the fathers to read books to their children. If you would just take 10 to 15 minutes twice a week and read a quality children's book to your children, it'll change their life forever, and it'll also change your life. So the purchases of books, we understand, are grandmothers and mothers. We would like to encourage the grandmothers and the mothers to buy the books as a gift, but not just a gift to the child, a gift to the father, so that the father would read to his children and encourage a behavioral change, so that fathers can share their hearts with their children by giving them attention for 10 to 15 minutes in reading a book like this. We will be introducing other children's books on our website and become a book review of children's books that I have read and that I would want my grandchildren to read. And I'm looking for peoples with fathers' hearts to read to my grandchildren. I do it myself, but I want the quality and the substance of those books to help them in their lives, to have a positive effect on their hearts and their lives. And that's what God the Father himself wants to do, to bring families into a greater unity and bring families into a stronger relationship with each other relationally, both between the children and the parents. But our primary focus is on the heart of the man, to grow him into a child of God, a son of God, and what a son of God does with the Father's heart, with his own family, and with his children. So thank you for participating with this, and we'll enjoy you until next time. Papa Tom.